Who is the new Talbot in town?
Why is Larry peeping through his telescope at the neighbors?
And is Larry really pure of heart and says his prayers by night?
These and other questions will be answered in this week's
It's Frenzy Frights.
Welcome to Frenzy Frights, a horror movie review show. My name is Jerry.
And I'm Chris.
And today on Frenzy Frights, we'll be discussing one of the great horror movies of all time. Chris, what movie were we talking about today?
Thank you, Professor. Today, we're going to talk about the movie The Wolfman. This was directed by George Wagner from Universal Pictures. It was released on December 9th, 1941 in the United States, December 12th, 1941 in the United Kingdom. It only has a running time of 70 minutes.
Nice.
Jerry, can you give us a synopsis of this movie, and we will follow up with information about the movie and our thoughts.
Well, my thoughts is I like a 70-minute movie. So we have spoilers ahead. So if you haven't watched the 1941 movie, The Wolfman, please watch it before listening and watching. And then let us know what you think and what we might have missed or got wrong. Couple trigger alerts, or one in particular, it's the word gypsy. It is considered insulting and a bad word now, but it was not in 1941. I'm going to use the word when I have to in my summary. It's very hard to avoid in this movie, and I apologize for any offense. We open seeing the temporarily jolly Larry Talbot returning home to his ancestral home in Wales from living in America for the past 18 years. He's back because his older brother John was killed in a hunting accident. Larry had been the so-called second son, but is now the heir to Talbot Castle. His father, Sir John Talbot, promises that all the coldness that had existed between them will now thaw out. Sir John is a researcher and has an observatory with a high-powered telescope. Larry's good with his hands, and set up the optics for it. While testing out his handiwork, he spies the beautiful Gwen Cunliffe in her bedroom putting on some half-moon earrings with spangles. Larry visits the Cunliffe antique shop and asks to buy half-moon earrings with spangles. She says they don't have anything like that, but he replies that she does in her bedroom. But she's confused, and he tells her that he is a psychic. She sells him a cane with a silver wolf's head instead, with a pentagram on it, and she explains that it references a werewolf. Even a man who is pure in heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright. Huh, weird. Yeah, a werewolf sees the mark of the pentagram in the palm of his next victim, don't you know? I know a plot point when I see one. Larry asks her out tonight at 8 o'clock. Gwen says no, but Larry says he'll be there anyway. That night at 8, Larry shows up at the antique shop and sees Gwen. Turns out the gypsies are in town. Let's get our fortunes told. Cool. But we are bringing my friend Jenny. Bummer, but okay, fine. While walking to the camp, they cut through the moors and find some wolfbane blooming. Jenny recites the even a man who's pure in heart shtick. Larry's like, what a weird poem. It's as meaningless as Stairway to Heaven, right? And they poo-poo him. Everyone knows about werewolves. Jenny gets her fortune told by Bela, the gypsy, but he sees the pentagram in her palm and freaks out, and that freaks Jenny out. Bela's mom, Mileva, observes the craziness. She goes running off into the moors while Bela presumably wolfs out. Larry and Gwen are walking on the moors and starting to get cozy. She tells him that he's engaged to Frank, who works for Larry's dad. Oops. Larry admits he isn't a psychic, but saw her in her bedroom with a telescope. There is an uncomfortable moment, but I think they are both imagining a single subscriber OnlyFans. Gwen is going to be starting that pretty soon, I think. Suddenly, they hear Jenny scream and Larry goes to help. She's being attacked by a wolf, and Larry hits the beast with his silver-headed cane repeatedly. However, he is bitten in the chest. Mileva comes upon the scene and knows what's what. It's like she's the only one who's read the script. She and Gwen drag Larry home and report the attack on Jenny. Wolves, gypsy women, murder, what is this? The next morning, Larry wakes up, and Sir John, the doctor, and Paul the cop come to his room. They found the cane at the scene, and Larry says it was his. They tell him that he killed Bela the gypsy, but Larry insists he killed a wolf. See, he bit me on the chest, but there is no wound. It must have healed up. Larry gets agitated and remains so for the next 5 or 6 movies. Everyone in town hears about Jenny being killed and Larry's involvement, and there are several uncomfortable interactions with the town's biddies. Gwen's fiancé, Frank Andrews, meets Larry but is super weird about it. Afterwards, he says, there is something very tragic about that man. Mileva warns Larry about the werewolf business. Bela was a werewolf. She gives him a pentagram necklace to protect him from the curse. We see his wound is now a pentagram. Go now and heaven help you. The gypsies bug out of town toot sweet because there's a werewolf in town. Larry gives Gwen the pentagram necklace and tells her what Mileva says. He wants to protect her from him, which would have been a better idea before the telescope incident, but things had progressed. They kiss. Later at home, by the power of a film dissolve, Larry changes into a werewolf and changes out of his wife beater into what looks like a gas station attendant shirt. Out on the moors, Larry kills a gravedigger. In the morning, he wakes up, sees the muddy tracks on his windowsill, and wipes them off because the wolf has been tracked to the castle grounds. The cops arrive, and Larry is unraveling. He tells everyone about the werewolf business, but everyone thinks he's just losing his mind. Sir John is concerned for his son, but he's a tough love kind of guy. The village thinks a regular old wolf is on the loose, and they set up bear traps in the moors. That night, Wolf Larry gets caught in a trap, and Mileva comes by and casts a spell to cure him. The way you walked was thorny, through no fault of your own. But as the rain enters the soil, the river enters the sea, so tears run to a predestined end. Pretty good. Doesn't rhyme, though. Anyway, Wolf Larry turns back into Sad Larry, frees himself, and takes off across the moors. When hunters see him and ask what he's up to, Larry says he's hunting the wolf like everyone else in town. Duh. Larry goes to Gwen, says he's leaving town. Gwen freaks and says she wants to go with him, but Larry refuses. Then he sees the mark of the pentagram on her hand and freaks out again. Larry tells the full story to his father and says he has to leave. Sir John poo-poos it all and that his mind is being warped by Mileva. Sir John ties Larry to a chair facing the window for some bad reasons and then leaves him to freak out while the full moon rises. That's some boomer parenting right there. Larry tells him to bring his cane, and Sir John takes the cane and goes out to hunt the wolf. On the moors, Sir John runs into Mileva, who warns him about Wolf Larry, and then he hears shots being fired. Everyone saw a wolf, and they're sure they hit him, but to no avail. He kept going anyway. Sir John heads that way. Now, Gwen is also out on the moors looking for Larry. Wolf Larry finds her and attacks. Sir John comes upon the scene and beats him with the silver cane. Wolf Larry film dissolves into Kid and Play Larry and then Dead Larry. Mileva says the thorny words again, but adds, now you will have peace for eternity. Or at least until the sequel. Sir John and Gwen are shocked. Cue the credits. The end. Chris, tell us some background about the movie The Wolfman.
Thanks, Prof. Great summation, by the way.
Thank you.
Well, at the time of this recording, this version of The Wolfman does not appear to be streaming on any popular pay platforms. This may pop up now and then on the Universal Monsters channel. I may or may not have this on DVD, but I opted for a $3.99 rental from the local cable service for the purpose of this podcast. For our cast, we have the great and talented Lon Chaney Jr., who played Larry Talbot / the Wolfman. He was born Creighton Tully Chaney in 1906 in Oklahoma City. It's said the film studio really wanted to capitalize on the Chaney name, so that's how he kind of leaned into that. He portrayed Larry Talbot / the Wolfman 5 times here in The Wolfman, then Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula, and Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. Chaney also played Dracula in Son of Dracula. He also did Frankenstein's Monster in The Ghost of Frankenstein, The Mummy in 3 pictures, and 6 films in the 1940s Inner Sanctum series.
Nice.
Other horror credits include Man-Made Monster. He also played Lenny Small in Of Mice and Men in 1939 and played supporting parts in dozens of mainstream movies and westerns, including High Noon. His last film was Dracula vs. Frankenstein, but there he played Groton the Zombie, and that was released in 1971. Chaney Jr. passed away in 1973 at age 67. Claude Rains played Sir John Talbot. Rains made his American film debut as Dr. Jack Griffin in The Invisible Man in 1933. He went on to play prominent roles in big screen productions such as The Adventures of Robin Hood, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Casablanca, of course, King's Row, Phantom of the Opera, the 1943 version, Notorious. In 1951, he won a Tony for Best Actor in a Play in the show Darkness at Noon. He also played Mr. Dryden in Lawrence of Arabia, and his final role was in the big biblical epic, The Greatest Story Ever Told. Ralph Bellamy was here. He could play Captain Montfort. He has a ton of credits. He was Ellery Queen in a series of movies in the 1940s. He had later roles in Rosemary's Baby, Oh God, Trading Places. I think that's where I first saw him on big screen. And he was also in Pretty Woman in 1990. Bela Lugosi played Bella. We've talked about the horror legend Bela Lugosi before, and it would take a whole podcast devoted to talk about his entire career. His credits include, of course, Dracula, Island of Lost Souls, The Black Cat, Mark of the Vampire, The Raven, The Invisible Ray, Son of Frankenstein, The Gorilla, The Devil Bat, The Black Cat, Ghost of Frankenstein, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, The Return of the Vampire, The Ape Man, Return of the Ape Man, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, Vampire Over London, Bela Lugosi Meets a Brooklyn Gorilla, Bride of the Monster, and Plan 9 from Outer Space.
My favorite.
Yes, so many in there. Maria Ospeskania played Maliva, an old Romani fortune teller in the horror genre, here and in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. And these were both with Lon Chaney Jr. and Bela Lugosi. Evelyn Ankers played Glenn Conliffe. Ankers starred in the films including this one, The Ghost of Frankenstein, Captive Wild Woman, Son of Dracula, The Mad Ghoul, Jungle Woman, Weird Woman, The Invisible Man, yes, The Invisible Man's Revenge, and The Frozen Ghost. She appeared in Hold That Ghost, Sherlock Holmes in The Voice of Terror, His Butler's Sister, The Pearl of Death, Tarzan's Magic Fountain, and she played Calamity Jane in The Texan Meets Calamity Jane in 1950. She was a frequent screen partner of Lon Chaney Jr., although some reports state that they privately disliked each other. Ankers, though, made over 50 films between 1936 and 1950. Some of them were like 3 or 4 a year. It was a very prolific career. Then she retired from the movies at age 32 just to be a housewife. Wow. Nothing wrong with that, I guess, but just... Okay, I'm going to stop. But to her credit, she had a long list of body of work already, so there we go. Yeah. She married Richard Denning, who had a decent movie career himself, but to me, he may be best known for his portrayal of the governor of Hawaii on the 70s version of Hawaii Five-0. Now, as for production of the film, Chaney did not go an on-screen facial transformation from man to wolf in the original film, as featured in all the sequels. The lap-dissolved progressive makeups were seen only in the final 10 minutes, and they were presented discreetly. In the first transformation, Larry removes his socks and shoes. His feet seem to grow hairy and become huge paws, courtesy of uncomfortable boots made of hard rubber and covered in yak hair. Now, in the final scene, the werewolf gradually returns to Larry Talbot's human form through the standard technique. Stories about the makeup and the transformation scenes have become legendary and are mostly apocryphal. The transformation of Chaney from a man into a monster was certainly laborious. The entirety of the makeup took 5 to 6 hours to apply and an hour to remove. Now, Jack Pierce had initially designed it for Henry Hull in Werewolf of London, but Hull argued that the disguise made no sense within the plot since the Dr. Glenn Carrier need to be recognized by the others, even in the werewolf form. Pierce was ordered to design a second version, which left more of Hull's face recognizable. Pierce then recycled his original design for the 1941 film. Chaney claimed he was forced to sit motionless for hours as the scenes were shot frame by frame. At times, he claimed that he was left to remain sitting while the crew broke for lunch. He was also equivocal about using the bathroom. Chaney even said, Special effects men drove tiny fishing nails into the sides so they would remain motionless for the rest as they were doing the close-ups. However, studio logs indicate that during the filming of Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, the entire crew, including Chaney Jr. himself, took a 2-hour break during the filming of the transformation and filmed the rest of the scene later that day. Though the makeup for Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein had significantly been redesigned and streamlined by Bud Westmore over the Jack Pierce makeup. A plaster mold was made to hold his head still as the image was photographed and his outline drawn on panes of glass in front of the camera. Chaney Jr. then went to makeup man Jack Pierce's department, where Pierce, using grease paint, a rubber snout appliance, and a series of wigs, glued layers of yak hair to Chaney's face. Then Chaney would return to the set, line himself up to the panes of glass as a reference, and several feet of film was then shot. Then Chaney would return to the makeup department, a new layer would be applied to show the transformation being further along, and then he returned to the soundstage of the film. This was done about a half dozen times. Talbot's lap dissolve transformation on screen only took seconds, while Chaney's took almost 10 hours.
Yikes.
For additional trivia, the wolf that Larry Talbot fights with Lon Chaney Jr. was Lon Chaney Jr.'s own German Shepherd.
Awesome.
Yes, the film popularized a number of myths about werewolves, such as the only way to kill a werewolf is with a silver bullet, as well as werewolves and their victims being marked with pentagrams. Some of the mythology is taken from the earlier film Werewolf of London, such as a werewolf bite turning another person into a werewolf, and others were original concepts created by writer Kurt Sidomak. Actual werewolf folklore is extremely varied. In some, one became a werewolf by being cursed or by making a pact with the devil, could turn in at any time, and were mortal and could be killed by conventional means. Later films added the detail of werewolves being immortal, again, an invention of Hollywood, and basically an excuse to bringing the character back for sequel after sequel. As previously stated, this film marks the first of 5 appearances of Lon Chaney Jr. as the Wolfman by Universal. Out of Universal's classic canon of characters, Chaney is the only actor to portray the same character in each of the studio's classic film and the sequels. As previously stated, Evelyn Ankers purportedly had difficulty working with Lon Chaney Jr., already angry at Ankers because she was giving his dressing room, allegedly for the studio punishing him for vandalizing studio property while drunk. The actor constantly would irritate her, nicknaming her Shankers, while playing juvenile and practical jokes. He liked to sneak up on her in full makeup and scare her. Larry's silver wolf-headed cane, the only surviving prop of the movie, currently resides in a personal collection of genre film Bob Burns. Burns, who was a schoolboy at the time, was given the cane head by the man who made it for the film, a prop maker named Ellis Berman. It has since been sold to a Maryland collector. The silver top of Larry's wolf-head cane was made out of vulcanized rubber, so none of the actors or the stunt doubles would get injured if they were accidentally hit by it. Maria Ospenskaya, who played the old, hate to say it, gypsy woman, was only 6 years older than Bela Lugosi, who played her son. This was the first Universal Pictures film since The Black Cat in 1934 to introduce major characters during the opening credits, and the actors playing them with brief clips of the movie. Ironically, Lon Chaney Jr.'s character is never referred to as the Wolfman in the film. Unlike some of the other classic Universal horror films of the 1930s and 40s, such as Dracula and Frankenstein, this film is from an original screenplay rather than the source material like a novel. Quote, even a man who is pure at heart and says his prayers at night may become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright, unquote. This quote has been listed in some sources as an authentic Eastern European folk saying. Writer Kurt Sidomak admits he simply made it up. Nonetheless, the rhyme would be recited in every future Universal film appearance of the Wolfman and would also be quoted in Van Helsing in 2004, albeit slightly modified. The moon is full and bright rather than the autumn moon is bright. In 2013, The Wolfman received a standalone Blu-ray release. In 2014, Universal released The Wolfman, the Complete Legacy collection on DVD. This set contains 7 films: Wolfman, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, Werewolf of London, and She-Wolf of London. In 2016, the 7-film Complete Legacy collection was released on Blu-ray. That same year, The Wolfman received a Walmart exclusive Blu-ray release featuring a glow-in-the-dark cover. Wow. And in September 2017, the film received a Best Buy exclusive Steelbook Blu-ray with a cover by Alex Ross.
Wow.
Incredible. This character is not to be confused with the similar Marvel comic book characters, Werewolf by Night or The Wolfman. However, there is currently an Image Comics Universal Monsters comic book based on the Wolfman character, but it is not Larry Talbot. There was a remake of the film in 2010 with Benicio del Toro, and in 2025 with Christopher Abbott, with both playing the title characters. Now we come to the podcast where we're going to share our initial reactions. And Prof, I'll leave the floor to you as you were watching this. What were you thinking, and what were some of your initial reactions?
Okay, so initial reactions, real initial reactions, would only be coming from me when I was, 7 years old. So it's been a while. This time watching it, I really like that encyclopedia definition of lycanthropy at the beginning of the movie, right after those credits, those opening credits. We get a lot of the important plot info in the text if you read it carefully. So in this movie, there are two key poems or incantations. So, even a man who is pure at heart and says his prayers by night. And then the other is from Maleva, the way you walked was thorny. The second one turned Wolf Larry into Sad Larry. And if it's that easy to turn somebody from a werewolf, I'm not sure what the problem is here. Just have someone say the poem and turn you back. Easy peasy. But I realize then you wouldn't have a movie. Bela seems to be surprised that it is full moon night. And I always have this problem with werewolf movies. If you turn into a wolf every month, you would know when it's coming. This is worse than a woman forgetting her period because you're going out murdering people and stuff, which is, really bad. I think here, watching this movie this time, I'm noticing that Gwen really is being a little trampy. The town is being judgy, and you're supposed to think, oh, those townspeople are so judgy. But they're not wrong. She is engaged to somebody, and she is definitely interested in Larry. This movie wants you to want Larry and Gwen to be together. She finds that she's able to get herself alone with him a lot. And I half expected Joey Greco to pop out behind a tree. This is from Cheaters. The use of even a man who is pure in heart poem is said by several characters, and it creates a world, I think, where werewolves are possible. And everyone seems to know about werewolves, but they don't believe it when one actually shows up, and there's even the line, everyone knows about werewolves. Like, you silly American, how would you not know about this? I also find it's interesting that everybody, all the actors show up on set here and use their own accents. They're all supposed to be British, most of them, except for Larry. But Gwen has an absolutely American accent. Paul Mumford has an American accent. And nobody seems to say anything, and they just don't worry about it, so I won't either. I also think that the clothes you wear when you turn into a werewolf has nothing to do with the werewolf was wearing on the moors, or how you wake up when what you're dressed when you wake up. So I think that is always interesting, and I even noticed that when I was a kid. Why does Larry get the Jack Pierce makeup and Bela gets Lon Chaney's German Shepherd? These are very different wolves, and I think Bela gets the short end of the stick. And the last thing I noticed in this viewing was I really like Talbot Castle. There's a lot of big floor-to-ceiling windows. It looks like a really great place to live. So, Chris, what are some of your initial reactions to The Wolfman?
Thanks, Prof. As I was taking notes, I noticed that my initial reactions were sort of overlapping with my favorite movie moments. I had to kind of sift and separate the two. I really love the 40s Universal opening we have with the 3D lettering and the spinning star rays. Really, really classic stuff here. One of the things I also noticed was something that I really loved was how we are shown the cast right out of the gate and who they are and who they play in the opening. And some are kind of doing nothing. Some are talking, and I really thought that was a nice touch. I vaguely recall this same thing being used in some of the old Dick Tracy serials of the day that did that as well. It was really nice. I really like that. Mixed reaction when I saw Bela. Bela as Bela, and I kind of went, aw, because I'm so glad that he's there, but even going back to when I was a child, when I saw that a certain actor was given a character to play with the same name, I think the director thought, oh, this may not be a talented actor, so we're not going to really mess up the character. And if they get called their real name, they're going to sort of get into it. And I kind of had a little personal bias by that. As I grew older, I sort of gave it a pass, but it's a little too spot on. Perhaps he should have got a different name, but I let it go. It's Bella. Fine. It's a classic movie. I noticed this was directed by George Wagner. One of the things I didn't list in the trivia is that I recognize the name being as someone who would also direct some of the 60s TV Batman episodes. So that was really nice, a touch there. And gosh, what are we using that telescope for? It seems we've had like a little bit of an ulterior motive. Perhaps not the intended use of a telescope, but mild cringe, but we'll move past that. Prof, this is the time of the podcast, though, where we're going to dive into our favorite movie moments, and I will once again yield the floor to you. What were some of your favorite movie moments of The Wolfman?
I think the number one favorite thing for me about this movie is the music. It's credited to Hans J. Salter, Frank Skinner, and Charles Previn. The soundtrack's available on Amazon Music, and I listen to it all the time. It's one of my favorite soundtracks of all time. Just this music as he's on the moors, and it just evokes such memories and such feelings for me. And I'm a music person, so it's just very powerful for me. And you mentioned it too, that opening Universal logo where you have the spinning globe and the sparkling stars and a Universal picture and text around the globe. Classic. I absolutely love it. It's the opening of so many of my favorite movies. I just love it. I love the scene when Larry shows up at the church and he's in the back of the church and everyone turns around slowly and he freaks out and leaves. They're all looking at him and judging him after Jenny's been killed, and like nobody was killed in town before Larry showed up. And he just absolutely freaks out and leaves. It's the beginning of his unraveling. I also like when he is stuck in the bear trap and he's come back to being Larry from being the Wolfman, and he's trying to release himself from the trap while all the hunters are trying to close in on him and stuff. He looks wild-eyed, and Lon Chaney really went there. I thought he was great in this. I also really like Mileva. She's a great character. I like... it's a very small thing, but when she and Gwen bring Larry to Talbot Castle and the men are kind of talking and Mileva kind of stands by the door and she just nopes out and she splits and leaves while the men are talking. It's very simple and it's brilliant. She knows where trouble is around and she's not going to be around to catch any of it. It's fantastic. And I also love the scene where she visits Bela's coffin while Larry's kind of hiding in the shadows looking on. And she does that, "The way you walked was thorny," and all that stuff. I really feel the impact of her loss, but also a relief that her son's pain is over. But Larry realizes it's just the beginning for him. It's really powerful to me. I've seen this movie many times. This may be the movie I've seen more times than any other movie. This time, I noticed at the beginning when Larry's arriving at Talbot Castle, he's got a driver bringing him, and then he arrives at the castle and he meets his dad after 18 years. He seems so light and breezy, which he remains until Jenny's wolf attack. And it's really refreshing because most of the time when I think about Larry Talbot's character played by Lon Chaney Jr., he's pretty grumpy. He's a downer for most of the time. He feels great guilt over killing all these people. But it's so great to see Lon Chaney Jr. being light and breezy. And it reminds me of how he is in some of those Inner Sanctum movies. And I really like that about Chaney. I think he's a great actor. So, Chris, what are some of your favorite movie moments?
Thanks, Prof. It seems in a lot of these films we have incompetent law enforcement. So once again, we have incompetent law enforcement lackey alert. Yeah. We have a scene where there's an inspector, some constables, or the authorities, and one person telling another, "Make a note of that, Twiddle." And it's repeated 5 times. This poor Twiddle is just taking down these notes. And I just don't know if this is going to crack the case or get anywhere, but all these little small details, "Make a note, Twiddle." Twiddle seems just sort of like a not. It seems like a silly name, such as a silly character, and there it is. It just rings of classic Universal monster movies, and here we are. There's no exception. I loved another sequence in this film where we had this flashback memory, and it's sort of done with a whirlwind hypnotic effect, and I thought that was very, very glorious. The transformation reveal, I thought this was kind of unique too, because I wasn't sure if it was in this film or the others, but yeah, he had the legs and the feet first, not the face. And I thought that was sort of a little bit of a clever use, because we all can picture in our mind the classic facial transformation, but don't forget, we also had this one here. And we don't really see the face until we see Talbot walking, and I thought that was kind of cleverly done with respect to that. We had another scene that I liked. Old Biddy's being mean. It just sort of lended some authenticity to the film. It sort of made it a little more personal, maybe a little more real. Another sad thing making it a little more real too. When we had the church scene, we had a lot of people and their faces full of scorn and turning their heads pew after pew as they were looking at Larry, and it just feeling that shame. It was sort of akin to me as a child when there was a little baby during the service at church, and if the poor baby was screaming, you always had these faces of turning, looking at this in disdain, and the poor mother kind of being shamed to take the baby out and let the baby do its thing. I think things are a little more relaxed, but back in the day, there was a lot of shame associated with going to church if you did something amiss or you weren't welcome there. Let's look at the men. Wow, everybody's wearing hats, and they're always adjusting their brims, and they're smoking pipes. They're doing manly things. And okay, it's sort of a bygone era. Can you imagine how many hat shops went out of business as the time evolved? And yeah, I'm kind of rubbing my head, because I think my father had at least... Wow, he probably had at least 5 hats, and I certainly never remember going to any hat store to buy hats. I know Detroit had a couple of hat stores that I saw, and I never really saw any in Memphis when I was growing up as a kid, certainly. They sort of sold hats along with, suits and ties in the department store, but there was never a specialty hat store. I saw a few in the Detroit area, but certainly that's sort of a bygone era. Yeah.
I love hats.
Once again, yeah, I think they're underrated. Yeah. Perhaps maybe they'll come back. Who knows? The facial transformation again in reverse. I had to make a second note of it. And one thing I noticed, boy, Maleva is really, really underrated here. I think the performance was outstanding, and how she delivers the line, "Now you will find peace in eternity." I just can't think of any other character saying that line with that authenticity, and it was just a chef's kiss on how the line was delivered. So shout out to Maria Alscapoya. Great job there.
Agreed.
Whew. Yes. So, Prof, here's the part of the show where we're going to pick this film apart a little bit, and I think you've got some discussion items listed on our script, so I'll let you take the floor first.
Yeah, so the first thing I wanted to talk about was the character of Larry Talbot. I think he was a wolf before he's bitten, and I think that's really highlighted by his telescope antics. He's got a complicated family life. He is trying to avoid the curse. He's got a lot of guilt about this. But is he really a victim? I mean, this is all set in motion because he is hitting on a woman who's engaged to another guy, a guy that works for his father and ultimately answers to him. So I think he is a little bit of a predator before he even gets bitten. He's also a second son, so he works with his hands while his older brother was trained in the family business and how to run the estate and how to be the next Sir Talbot. And I think it's shown that it makes him, Larry, feel inadequate or not good enough. He has an exchange with Claude Rains where Claude Rains is like, we have a habit in the Talbot family of being, cold to second sons, and second sons really resent it. And Larry says, "Don't I know it?" And I think that really shows that he is very insecure with his place in the family and in this town, although he was in America for 18 years. He actually helped set up the telescopes at the Mount Wilson Observatory, according to the movie. He isn't good with theory like his father, but his father's a researcher, presumably some kind of astronomer, and Larry's in the family business in that way. but he's untrained in the social graces of the town. He doesn't seem to realize, not really having been an adult in the UK, in England or Wales or wherever this is set, that being the heir to Talbot Castle is a very important figure in the town. And he's out, trying to date Gwen, a woman who's already engaged to an employee. He's very just in it for himself. So I think that his character is very complicated, and much more complicated than you'd expect in a 70-minute movie. So how about you, Chris? What do you think about the character of Larry Talbot?
Well, Prof, I think you made a great observation because you stated accurately that Larry comes in, and when he enters, he's this light and breezy character, but then he's kind of a downer for the rest of the sequels. And I think you're really onto something there. One of the things I caught, and I really can't add much more to what you laid out on the table, was when we see the credits going, it says Lon Chaney as the Wolfman. It doesn't say Lon Chaney as Larry Talbot, which makes you wonder, are they kind of short-shrifting this guy's identity at all and who this character really is? Because there, as you previously stated, there is sort of this depth here. You make some great observations with respect to this, but the movie itself even dismisses the Larry Talbot character. It says, no, this is just the Wolfman, so he really has no other identity. And I think you kind of encapsulated something there, what really was key and focal to the character, but not necessarily observed as such, even by the filmmakers itself. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. And he's credited as Lon Chaney, not Lon Chaney Jr.
Yes, exactly. Good point.
So now, how about this, the makeup and the transformation scenes? You came up with some good info on that, but I think, do you have any other comments related to that?
Only in the such as I was watching this film, I thought we were going to get the facial thing there, but I sort of misremembered it and had false memories. And I think you really hit upon something with respect to this, because I tried to envision myself as Chaney Jr. and having makeup applied. And I'm just wondering, could I have stayed still? What other modern techniques could have been applied by this? But I think as you do any project, you look to see who did it before you. What did they do, and can we capitalize it? And I think that's where you were going with your point with respect to Hull. Am I correct, Professor?
Yeah. So this, as you mentioned, this makeup was rejected by Henry Hull in Werewolf of London. His point was it looks more like a bear than a wolf, and I think that's true. I think the feet, you also had some great information on the boots that they used. They look really kind of weird. And as an aside, I had a pair of slippers that were really big and looked like Wolf Larry's feet. And I used to kind of stand on my tiptoes like Larry does, and like as the wolf, and pretend I was the Wolfman. The shot, you went into really good detail about how the film dissolves work. I can only imagine what a nightmare that must have been to set up. And I wouldn't be, I don't blame Lon Chaney for getting drunk and wrecking the set after that, because wild. I personally, though, prefer Hull's makeup. It doesn't cover his face. Hull can act, and I think it's really, really creepier than this. That really does kind of look like a bear. Jack Pierce did great with Frankenstein, and let's leave it at that. So tell us what you think. Another character that I thought was interesting here, and is very brief, you went into some information before, is Bela Lugosi's character, and her and Mileva together and separately. Do you have any comments about how that worked out?
I just wanted more Bella. I think every time you see the man on screen, he steals the show. And I really wanted a little bit more of that. I'm wondering, though, with everything being picked apart with elements of fiction, I'm just wondering, could that have been like its own standalone series in itself, as you will? Can you imagine, like, Mileva and what kind of life she led? There's a woman of wisdom here, and I wouldn't be remiss if I would like to perhaps seeing an origin story, if you will, of this character and this relationship and how that developed. It really is kind of presented on the table, and then it's kind of taken off as the movie goes away. And it's just like, hey, I think we were onto something here, and I wouldn't really mind seeing this explored. But perhaps if someone's listening and they think, there's a whimsy of an idea, maybe we can put this in front of a showrunner and make something out of this. Because if we're ever hurting, if we need a little bit more horror that might be a little more of a less expensive thing to shoot.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe someone out there has written fiction about these characters that I don't even know about. Prof, I'm getting way out in the weeds here, but I'm going to let you take the floor. What did you think of Bela Lugosi's character and Maleva's relationship?
I am absolutely going to just piggyback on what you said. I think that is a great idea. I would love to see an origin story between the two. One thing I did notice in this watching is Larry had the pentagram on his chest because he was bitten on the chest. But when you saw Bela doing the palm reading for Jenny, I saw, presumably the moon was up, I saw a pentagram on Lugosi's forehead. And it made me wonder if Bela was bitten in the head. Fascinating. And you were spot on when you said Bela has a very brief part, but you just can't take your eyes off him. He is just such a great actor and has such a powerful presence in this and everything he ever does.
Indeed. Now, Prof, one of the things... speaking of great actors, we had the talented Claude Rains here as well, and I think there was something you wanted to bring before. So I'll start with you on this. What did you think of Claude Rains' character here, specifically in this film?
Claude Rains is one of my favorite actors. So in terms of Casablanca, all those other films that you mentioned, Lawrence of Arabia, he has a relatively small but very powerful part. Here, Sir John, he's kind of split. He's a man of science. So it isn't like Larry is going home to some folklory kind of world. His father is a man of science, but also of tradition and very much in that kind of British class culture. So he's open-minded through science, but he's not flexible with social things. He refuses to send Larry away when it's clear that the locale is really troubling him. And he says something like, 6 generations of Talbots have lived in this castle. And then he ties Larry to a chair and leaves him alone while he deals with the moon coming up. I mean, that is not very compassionate for somebody who really does seem to understand about, mental illness and stuff. He says lycanthropy is the good and evil in every man's soul, and evil takes the shape of an animal in lycanthropy. So he's definitely a forward-thinking person, but doesn't extend that to his son. And I think that's tough. And there's another exchange that I think really highlights that, and it's early. So Larry has met his old friend, Paul Mumford, who is now a police captain. And Larry says, so old Paul turned out to be a cop. And Sir John says, huh? What do you mean? And Larry says, a cop, a policeman. And Sir John just says, Captain Mumford. And I really think that this shows Sir John's fixation with this social standing and that Larry is ignorant of it and needs to be corrected. He's not talking about how Paul turned into a policeman. He is just saying, no, forget all that stuff that you're trying to tell me. You call him Captain Mumford, and ignoring Larry's other feelings about it. So I think that really shows a social rigidity of Sir John. How about you, Chris? What do you think about the character?
Prof, like you, I really am a huge Claude Rains fan, and I just think there is such a presence to the actor, and he delivers it with so many layers here with respect to this. You made some excellent observations, and I don't think I can top what you said. I think there are so many moments here that are sad because it seems like, as you say, he's a man of science, but I think he's also resigned to a lot of things. And I'm wondering, scratching my head as I'm watching this, if I found the ending sort of anticlimactic and what, if any, reaction was there to killing his son. And I'm wondering what you thought about that, Prof, because you said this was a short movie. You like that it was compact and concise. I don't know if there was any more story that could be told with this respect to the film, but I'm wondering, did you find the ending sort of anticlimactic, and should there have been a little bit more of a reaction to how this ended with respect to his character?
That's interesting because I haven't I've seen this movie so many times, and it is what it is. It's kind of like it's
Yes.
self defines itself in my mind. I like when the movie ends. The movie ends. Larry's killed, and within a minute, we see credits. I think his reaction to killing his son is shock. He's just stunned, and he doesn't cry or get upset, visibly upset, or have any lines really. It's just a shot of him, a shot of Gwen, credits. And I think that they're like, I would like to see a prequel with Bela and Maliva. I would like to see a sequel with Sir John. Maybe Sir John's been bitten. Maybe you could have him as the next Talbot werewolf. Yeah, I can see what you mean about being anticlimactic just because it ends so quickly. But I find it hard to criticize it for that just because it kind of is self-referential. How about you, Chris? What do you think?
Yeah, Prof, I think you hit the nail on the head. I just really like how this movie has such a legacy for you and your attachment to this film. And I really, really am enjoying you talking about it. So I think you're really onto something. And yeah, I really, really like your idea there with respect to the sequel. So good stuff there. Thank you.
All right, Chris, can you score The Wolfman?
Thanks, Prof. I am going to attempt to score The Wolfman. The Wolfman, let's face it, it's unique. It's a classic monster, but unlike Dracula and the Frankenstein films that preceded it, this wasn't based on a previous literary work. How cool is that? The Wolfman, look at it. It has iconic actors. It's an iconic film. The character spawned other iterations. It spawned imitators of the character. And this really cements itself in the horror legacy of film. I don't know if I would call this film a, quote, cinematic masterpiece, unquote. But hey, this is, if you're a horror fan or a fan of great movies, this is a must-watch horror classic. So my grade is a solid A. Prof, how about you? Can you possibly score this film?
No.
And take apart some...
No, I cannot. I'm going to give it an A+. And anything I give an A+ is just because I can't judge it any other way. This is a foundational movie for my life. I think this is a better movie than Werewolf of London, and we'll eventually get to that movie and its flaws. But I like the makeup in the older movie, and I think that's much better, in my opinion. I like how short and to the point this movie is. There's a perfect amount of story, and I wish more movies got to business like this one did. I think that this is a 1940s Universal movie as opposed to the 1930s Universals, Dracula, Frankenstein, Mummy, those kind of movies. So I think the technique of sound movie making is better, and I can't leave without giving another shout out to the music. I think this is a classic score, and just listening to this, when I listen to the soundtrack, I can see the movie. It's that tied for me, and I just get that when I hear, dun da 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 da. It's just Halloween for me. I'm just so happy, and it's glorious. So I just love it, and it's got to be an A+ for me.
Thank you, Prof. It's a treat to listen to someone who talks about the film they love and why they love it, and I really, really enjoyed that. So thank you very much for doing a great job on this particular episode of this podcast.
Oh, thank you. Great information, and really, I learned a lot from you on this one, too.
I learned a lot for myself putting it together. People in the audience, tell us what you think about this movie.
And thank you for checking out Frenzy Frights. Check out our other shows, the ProfessorFrenzy Show, where we cover indie comics, That Guy in That Show, where we look at great character actors, and our Twilight Zone episode review, where we review Twilight Zone episodes of all things. Thanks for listening and watching.
It's Frenzy.